A esperança em Wall Street é que o pior tenha ficado para trás. Que o colapso da Bolsa no ano passado e os atentados de 11 de setembro sejam apenas parte da história. Que no próximo ano os investidores terão esquecido o passado, recuperado a confiança e voltado com tudo. Mas uma nuvem ainda paira sobre Wall Street. Nos últimos 18 meses, tanto o governo quanto advogados independentes estão investigando se o mercado otimista dos últimos anos despencou, não só devido à especulação excessiva, mas à fraude. Se bancos de investimentos e casas de corretagem ocultaram conflitos de interesse e manipularam deliberadamente o valor das ações. Será que os maiores nomes de Wall Street traem a confiança do público?
CS First Boston, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch. I mean, these are the biggest players. And that's what makes this so shocking, that it could infect even institutions of that size. These are revered institutions in Wall Street.
A bubble environment brings out the basest qualities of all the players, the kinds of guidelines that monitor corporate behavior tend to be more flexible at a time of excess, and it feeds upon itself.
This was generally a good day for investors.
Há poucos anos, os americanos assistiram bestificados a analistas dos bancos de investimentos indicando uma infinidade de ações na TV.
AOL, Yahoo, Amazon.
Foi a versão de Wall Street de uma maratona televisiva.
Internet stocks drove a powerful surge on Wall Street today. The Dow Jones Industrial.
No coração dessa loucura estavam bancos e capitalistas de risco ávidos por abrir o capital de centenas de empresas de internet jovens.
But I think the long-term opportunity really is to be the customer interface to your doorstep.
Some say the internet is so revolutionary that the usual rules for valuing a stock, such as revenues and earnings, no longer apply.
Cenas como esta se repetiram incessantemente nas pontocom. No dia em que a empresa abria seu capital, os funcionários acompanhavam a incrível valorização de suas ações, transformando muitos deles em milionários no papel. Entre 1990 e meados do ano 2000, mais de 4.700 empresas estrearam nas bolsas americanas.
The conclusion that we came to, rightly or wrongly so, was that the internet was going to fundamentally change the way business was run, across the board, in every sector of business.
Everybody thought they could get rich quick. Everybody across from retail investor to investment bank. We had this period where money was growing on trees, which is totally cool while it's going on.
We're now up to 34, the daily volume, 3.7 million shares. We are almost a $2 billion company.
Esta empresa, a Elon, abriu a $14 e fechou a 37, uma valorização de 164% no primeiro dia. Enquanto os investidores pediam mais, os bancos, que embolsam 7% de todas as ofertas públicas que subscrevem, iam à caça de novas empresas de internet.
The day that we moved into our offices, we started getting calls from investment bankers inquiring as to what our thoughts were on raising additional capital or going public. This is before we had furniture. Literally, we had boxes for our desks, and we were sitting on the floor.
Michael Burke era presidente da modern-nature.com.
There was that level of buzz in the overall public markets at the time. And you laugh about it. You're sitting there with your box going, should I buy furniture or should I talk to the investment banker about going public?
Going public that time, in my mind, is probably almost exactly the same as if I was raising a first or a second round of venture capital. There's a lot of unproven elements.
Brian Nesmith era presidente de uma empresa de tecnologia de internet chamada Cashflow.
I haven't proven that we can be profitable. I haven't proven that I can really grow the revenue. I don't have all the members of the management team. The product may even still have some technology issues that we have to validate. And effectively, the way I started to think of it is we had millions of investors that started acting like venture capitalists, and they're not necessarily very smart ones. They don't do the due diligence. They don't do the fundamental work.
There were so many deals that went through during, 99 and 2000, And the hardest part for both sides, for bankers and analysts, the hardest part was that a lot of companies that looked like there was no there were getting out into the marketplace and going to the moon.
Bastava adicionar as palavras .com ao seu nome e fazer algumas promessas megalomaníacas.
As we like to say, one day we will touch every mortgage in America.
Quando Seth Warner transformou a First Mortgage Network na Mortgage.com, o valor de mercado da empresa saltou de 100 milhões para 800 milhões de dólares.
We went around to all of the underwriters, the largest underwriters in the country, most prestigious by anybody's count. Every one of them was suggesting that this was a wonderful time to take a company like ours public.
Ajudar empresas a abrirem seu capital é um dos negócios mais lucrativos dos bancos de investimentos. Naturalmente, procuramos os banqueiros para que comentassem o processo. Ligamos e escrevemos cartas, mas os bancos Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse First Boston, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch e Morgan Stanley se recusaram a falar conosco. Essas instituições tentam conquistar nossa confiança há muito tempo. Mas o que está oculto por trás do véu da retórica e das imagens dos comerciais é que a natureza do seu negócio mudou.
When did things change? I can tell you the exact day it changed. The world changed on May 1, 1975, May Day. Because that was the day commissions were deregulated.
Joe Nocera é editor e repórter da revista Fortune.
As commissions went down, suddenly we had to find some other way to make money for the house.
Estas instituições, que antigamente eram simplesmente casas de corretagem, lucravam muito dando conselhos financeiros a clientes e cobrando uma comissão por cada transação. Mas quando a desregulamentação forçou a queda do valor das comissões, elas passaram a lucrar mais com seus investimentos. Nos anos 80, isso aconteceu através das fusões e aquisições. Até que em 95, aconteceu a oferta pública inicial, ou IPO, da Netscape. A empresa não tinha nem 1 ano e meio de vida, seu faturamento era baixo e seu lucro nulo. Mas sua estreia mudou tudo.
In 1995, Netscape goes public. It's the first big, nobody expects what happens in Netscape. It's the first big pop stock. It was just, whoa, you know, what was that all about? And suddenly, if you're an investment bank, you realize that this is something that can be taken advantage of.
It was very hard to justify the price of it on any rational economic benchmarks that you usually use.
Depois da Netscape, centenas de empresas brotaram no Vale do Silício. Nomes como Yahoo, eBay e Exide. Novas empresas não costumam ser lucrativas e geralmente só são oferecidas ao público quando passam a ser.
Most companies in Silicon Valley used to take, 6 or 7 years of losses to finally get to profitability, and then a little bit longer to go public. So there was a more measured quality of moving these companies into the public space.
Cara Switcher tem uma coluna no Wall Street Journal e foi nossa consultora neste projeto.
Presumably, the people that are in the public markets, they're buying fully baked companies, and these weren't in the oven for 10 minutes, these kind of things. They were not even close to being baked, and they were offering them up as cooked.
No Vale do Silício, os bancos de investimentos confiavam nos chamados capitalistas de risco para encontrar e desenvolver as empresas que mais tarde teriam seu capital aberto pelos bancos. Depois da Netscape, surgiu uma categoria mais agressiva de capitalistas de risco. Jay Hogue fundou a Technology Crossover Ventures em 95.
I think what Netscape triggered was a sense that you didn't have to be profitable to go public. That if you were growing fast enough, at some point in the future, you would grow into profitability. And, it unleashed a lot of different things, including huge numbers of IPOs, really big upcycle in venture funding. and to some extent some bad ideas.
Durante a bolha, a TCV, firma de Hogue, teve faturamento impressionante, lucrando mais de 100% por ano durante vários anos, um dos recordes de investimentos do Vale do Silício. No ano 2000, a TCV atraiu $1 bilhão e 600 bilhões em investimentos e tornou-se o maior fundo de capital de risco de tecnologia da história dos Estados Unidos. Mas ao contrário das firmas tradicionais que investem numa empresa nova e a desenvolvem aos poucos, o TCV investiu em várias empresas meses antes da sua oferta pública inicial. Perguntamos a Jay Hogue e ao seu sócio Ray Kimball se eles acham que se precipitaram ao lançar empresas tão jovens no mercado.
All these businesses that are losing money have to be financed. You have to go get money somewhere. At that point in time, what the market was saying was you should go get basically almost free capital and in the process get public. So as a board member, the decision would be very tough to not push a company toward an IPO.
O problema foi que muita gente que comprou ações de empresas que tiveram seu capital aberto pela TCV nos mercados públicos perdeu muito dinheiro.
which was a 10% customer last quarter.
There was a banker taking a company public, a pretty prominent banker, and he sent me the prospectus for the company, and the company had no revenues. There was no money coming in, like they had no customers, and they were taking it public. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I'm looking out my window, and there is a grandmother on the street with a purse, and I bet if I go mugged her, we could go do it together right now, because that's what you're doing. You're mugging the public."
Do you believe there was an inappropriate transference of risk to the public?
You know, we can't. Words like inappropriate. I don't feel in a position to make a value judgment about what is, quote, appropriate versus what is inappropriate.
Em contato direto com banqueiros, empresas jovens continuaram abrindo capital. A roda viva da especulação funcionava a pleno vapor e algumas dessas empresas pontocom tiveram desempenho excepcional, ficando entre as 10 maiores altas diárias de todos os tempos. Afinal, quem saiu lucrando com isso? É o que você vai ver depois do intervalo nesse documentário inédito que faz parte da nossa programação de aniversário.
Empresas jovens continuaram abrindo seu capital, fosse isso prudente ou não. O processo começava com uma ligação para os banqueiros.
Are we going to make it?
Don't worry. We'll get you there.
What you do is you invite the bankers who have expressed interest in to talk to you at a board meeting, and they pitch their services. It's called a bake-off. And so in, I believe it was June, we had a board meeting where we had a number of investment bankers who came in and pitched our board.
You're looking at past reputation, what position do they have in the investment community, how much are they willing to stand behind what they're doing in this environment. And a lot of it, too, is it's a name for you.
If it's a good, solid company with solid backers, you know, the CSFB and Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, they'll all want to take them public.
The top companies in the running for our consideration were Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and CS First Boston.
Quando banco é selecionado, a empresa é levada para uma turnê de 2 semanas, na qual visita fundos mútuos e outros investidores corporativos, e os executivos apresentam seus projetos na tentativa de atrair compradores para a IPO. É o chamado roadshow.
The roadshow is just a repetitious repeat of the message that you're trying to help investors understand about the product. The bankers then take you out, and it's done as a very condensed event. It's anywhere from a 2 to a 3 week process. We started in New York, then Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, Chicago, Minneapolis, Houston, Dallas, San Francisco, Los Angeles.
And the poor company for 2 weeks is in meetings from 6 in the morning until 7 at night, back to back, doing meetings with all these various institutional investors, pitching their story.
David Siminoff é gerente financeiro do Capital Group, que supervisiona o American Funds, uma das maiores famílias de fundo mútuo do mundo.
So what happens, the sales trader will call and say, I have an IPO that you ought to look at, and they're coming around, April 7th, and they're going to be in San Francisco. Can you sit down and meet with them for an hour? and hear their story.
You put me in front of a human being or a mannequin or a gorilla, I was going to go through the same pitch. Of course, I had to be responsive to their questions, but I'm just there to sell, pull the string and I'm selling.
In the end, what Cashflow wanted to get out of the IPO was a half dozen institutional investors that believe in what you're doing, believe in the company, believe in the management team, and are not only going to be purchasing at the IPO, but are going to be long-term accumulators of the stock.
In tonight's Moneyline Movers, Cashflow up 102 3/8 in its stock market debut. The networking equipment maker enjoyed one of the best opening days ever. The stock trading at 5 times its offering price.
O lançamento da Cashflow foi sucesso. Até hoje está entre as 10 maiores altas diárias de todos os tempos. As IPOs viraram coqueluche na maratona da tecnologia. Com as altas, as empresas ganhavam popularidade, mas só isso.
What the stock did, up 482% or so. If the investment banks had been doing their job the way they were supposed to be doing, if they really had the best interest of the companies at heart, you would have never seen the situation where stocks or IPOs go up 200, 300, 400% on the first day. I mean, that is a crime.
Priceline.com is the latest beneficiary of the internet stock craze. Shares of the internet commerce company debuted at $16. They closed at $69, a rise of over 330%.
The famous case is the globe.com, which I believe went up over 500% on the first day. And it was like, oh, my God, look at that, look at that.
Earth Web was up 379%, and the globe.com, which only traded one day, gained 606% on the week.
What is the reason you have an IPO? It's to put money in the coffers of the company. That's the reason you do it. When you have a situation where it's going up 300% on the first day, that's 300% that the company is not getting.
The Amazon.com of drugstores went public today in the latest smashing net debut. Drugstore.com nearly tripled in price.
Os investidores individuais também não lucraram muito com as altas. Isso porque quase todas as ações da IPO já tinham sido reservadas para os grandes investidores corporativos durante o roadshow.
Shares of the online pharmacy exploded on their debut trading day.
Aí, quando a ação disparava, os grandes investidores vendiam imediatamente no chamado flipping.
In a 4-year period, I saw over 500 IPOs. We probably owned 200 or 250 of them for 10 minutes, many of them for 10 minutes, where they would, at $8 or $10 a share, you thought, okay, I can understand how this can compound at 20% a year if they hit their targets. But when the first print of the IPO was $95.
You get them for $15, and they go up to $126, and you sell them. And, of course, everybody wanted them because it was a sure thing. There was no way you could lose money because every time one of these companies went public, they shot up by, 500, 600, 700%. So there really was no way to lose money.
The great majority of the people that we saw on the roadshow bought the stock at the IPO and flipped it that same day or flipped it within a couple weeks.
O rei absoluto das ofertas públicas do Vale do Silício era o banqueiro Frank Quattrone. Ele ficou famoso no Morgan Stanley, onde em 95 entrou para a história das IPOs quando abriu o capital da Netscape. Quattrone foi dos primeiros banqueiros de Wall Street a montar escritório no Vale do Silício.
He was sort of this larger-than-life figure in the Valley who had some huge successes and was considered sort of outrageous and opinionated and aggressive and sort of swashbuckling. He has that swashbuckling reputation.
I think he really identified much more with the Silicon Valley entrepreneur than his investment banking cohorts back in New York.
Quattrone não quis falar conosco, mas os repórteres Randall Smith e Susan Pulliam do Wall Street Journal acompanham sua carreira desde os seus dias no banco Morgan Stanley até o Credit Suisse First Boston.
The thing that distinguished First Boston here is that they did have the foresight to hire the best technology banker in the business just before this enormous boom in technology stock issues. And it literally took the firm from being an also-ran in stock underwriting to the very top in the rankings. But the thing that people come back to most often when they talk about Frank Quattrone is control, that he's a control freak. And wants to be involved in every step of the process.
The people at Morgan and Goldman had more of a conservative air, and Frank had more of like a venture capitalist himself. He has kind of a big personality, and you don't. It's not about CSFB, it's about Frank Quattrone.
Em 1998, Quattrone tinha aberto o capital de mais empresas do que qualquer outro banqueiro do Vale. Um selecionadíssimo grupo de capitalistas de risco lhe apresentava as novas empresas e, em troca, participava das ofertas públicas. No Vale, eles eram conhecidos como os amigos de Frank.
Being a friend of Frank involved being either a venture capital executive or an executive of a company that was about to go public or was public, or just technology executives. But one of the perks of being a friend of Frank was you got to invest in some of his deals, or, in some cases, all of his deals.
What does that mean, you got to invest in his deals? Anybody can invest in his deals or not?
Well, no, I mean, I think in order to get, you and I, if we went to our broker and tried to get an IPO allocation, would be told, gee, maybe or probably not, but but a hedge fund that would generate a lot of commissions might have a chance to get an IPO allocation. And similarly, part of the process of being a client of Credit Suisse First Boston was that you would have a better shot at getting shares of some of these IPOs that were skyrocketing in price.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, VA Linux clearly is a case where one of Frank's best clients, Jay Hogue of TCV, Technology Crossover Ventures, got 50,000 shares, which is a pretty large allocation.
A TCV afirma que Jay Hogue recebeu sua colocação em dezembro de 99. Apesar de a TCV não ter financiado a VA Linux, Hogue era um dos fornecedores que Quattrone queria favorecer. A IPO da VA Linux foi um tremendo sucesso.
Well, one piece of evidence, VA Linux, LNUX, is up again this morning in
A colocação deu ao fundo de franchise da TCV o direito de comprar 50 mil cotas da VA Linux pelo preço de oferta.
This stock came public yesterday at $30 a share. And now it's at $262, according to Instinet.
As ações da VA Linux alcançaram a maior alta da história de Wall Street. A TCV investiu $1,5 milhão. No final do primeiro dia de negócios, o valor da colocação da TCV se aproximava dos 12 milhões.
Suddenly you get this huge surge where the stock leaps 7 times, creates $1 billion or $1.2 billion of market value. That's profit to the person who got the IPO allocation. And if you trace it out, I think you'll find anything that goes that high, almost all of it is flipped, because it just doesn't make sense almost not to. So effectively, the underwriter parceled out $1.2 billion of guaranteed profit to his clients. That's quite as you can imagine, that's a very nice thing to happen.
It's like legalized bribery. It's favor building. It's like taking someone out to lunch and paying for their meal. Now, that's okay, but if you gave me a yacht, that would probably not be okay.
Hogue recusou-se a falar especificamente sobre a VA Linux, mas defende o processo de colocação das IPOs.
The specific allocation of how IPOs happens is the investment bank's business. Why we, have been allocated shares, again, we have an ongoing, we're generating trading commissions because of the franchise fund with a whole variety of investment banks. So in some cases we don't get IPO allocations because they say now, based upon the criterion we're making for allocations, you're not big enough to warrant it. In other cases where we're an important, perhaps, generating trading commissions or other things, we do.
People tend to focus on the period where it seemed right, like every IPO was going up 100 or 200%. We can tell you many times, including the very first IPO that TCV was involved with a little company called Saville Systems, where we placed our order for the IPO and got our IPO shares and watched the stock drop 20% in about an hour and a half.
Mas, na TCV, isso raramente acontecia. Segundo a revista Fortune, a TCV só perdeu dinheiro em 2 das 76 empresas nas quais investiu entre 95 e 99. Em alguns casos, investidores privilegiados, como a TCV, tinham a opção de comprar pelo preço de emissão, depois que a ação já havia começado a subir.
In one case in particular, I can remember getting a call toward the end of the first day of trading for a company. They had priced the IPO at $13. It was trading. You could look at your Quotron screen and say, it was trading at $40. And you get a call from the investment banker saying, would you like 5,000 shares of this company? Hello? It's
at what price?
Well, at $13. You can buy it because they still haven't, there's still this allocation, this stock, this IPO stock, that isn't fully allocated yet. So you can buy it at 13 when it's selling right there in your Quotron at 42.
So the investment banker has offered you free money.
You get a call, absolutely. And you can sell it and flip it right then and there.
I think underwriters' economic agendas started to determine who would get the stock. Instead of a situation where you're hired as an underwriter to place the stock with people who are going to be the long-term shareholder, when you get into volatile hot markets where you get this unusual first-day trading profit, there's a tremendous propensity to give that stock to your best clients. And they, in turn, sell it and take a quick profit. And then the long-term buyer, the guy who you want in the first place, ends up buying it at the volatile aftermarket price. And it happens only when you get into these really hot markets. But it also creates an atmosphere where an underwriter's sales force is, in effect, giving away guaranteed profit. And if you're giving away guaranteed profit, you probably, at some point in the food chain, are going to have some deal made that returns something to the underwriter.
Em meados de 99, todos os insiders de Wall Street sabiam que alguns bancos já estavam aceitando pagamentos de alguns fundos mútuos e de cobertura de risco em troca de colocações em ofertas públicas quentes. Mas em meio a todo o frenesi, ninguém estava disposto a denunciar isso. Muita gente estava enriquecendo. Pedimos que o ex-presidente da SEC, Arthur Levitt, comentasse um caso hipotético.
A large mutual fund is receiving an allocation in an IPO on the understanding that they will make certain purchases or pay higher commissions in the aftermarket. Is that a serious violation?
I think if hypothetically, if that investor, that recipient of an IPO, was required to pay extraordinary commissions on a non-related transaction or required to make specific aftermarket purchases, I believe that hypothetically you could consider that a manipulative action.
That manipulates the price of a stock.
It could.
It could manipulate the price of a stock. The intention is to manipulate the price of the stock.
It could.
I would assume that that's the intention, is to manipulate the price of the stock upwards and finally dump it to the public and all the insiders get out.
I wouldn't comment on that.
But I wouldn't be too far off base to guess that would be the result.
That's a possibility on a hypothetical instance.
Only one network truly covers the financial markets around the globe.
Uma vez que uma IPO é emitida, a ação começa a ser negociada na bolsa. É a primeira chance que os investidores comuns têm de comprá-la. É aí que os analistas dos bancos e a imprensa têm um papel vital.
The world leader in business news is CNBC. Profit from it.
If you are the investment banker for a company, I think it's 30 days or 25 days after the company goes public, your obligation is to put out a research report saying, here's what this company does, here's how I valued it, here's what I think of it.
Analistas estavam sempre na TV e Liz Boyer admite que eram pressionados a dar notícias positivas para manter seus clientes satisfeitos. Aqui, ela está recomendando a Beyond.com, uma empresa cujo capital tinha sido aberto pelo seu banco, o CSFB.
Retailing has changed because of Amazon. Little Beyond.com, a much smaller company, is working very hard on downloading products to consumers. That will be a big deal. Small today, but watch it going forward. If your firm has done banking work for a client, it's understood that the analyst is not going to come out and say, bad idea, stay away from this.
over the last several years and quarters, they've trended upwards. So if you can stand the volatility, they're good stocks to own.
It is best to go
Quanto
with
mais
the brand.
influência um analista tinha, maior era a pressão.
Some of the bigger stars were cheerleaders, not analysts. And it was no longer about who was doing the best analysis, because the best analysis got you nowhere. It was who was being the best cheerleader for those companies. And that's problematic, that's troublesome.
And in today's Stock Pick segment, Internet analyst Scott Aaron.
Recomendações positivas podiam ter um efeito dramático. Quando o Bear Stearns abriu o capital da Digital River, o analista do banco, Scott Aaron, recomendou a sua compra. A ação subiu 500% nos 3 meses seguintes. Mais tarde, ele reiterou sua recomendação na CNN.
The internet companies. And I like Digital River because I think it's an undiscovered e-commerce name that today primarily
Muitos
sells
dos que
software.
perderam dinheiro acham que Aaron devia ter revelado que o capital da Digital River tinha sido aberto por seu banco, que tinha interesse na valorização da ação.
$1 billion market cap. I think it's relatively undiscovered and has a great management team, and I expect it to be a big success.
Era raro um analista recomendar uma venda. O Bear Stearns recomendava a venda em menos de 1% das vezes.
Why do you never use a sell recommendation?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I don't think it's true to say that people never use a sell recommendation.
Well, why do they rarely ever use a sell recommendation?
Because I guess they rarely thought that you should be selling the stock. They thought that maybe it was a longer-term hold.
Did it have to do with a feeling that a sell recommendation would possibly do too much damage to the company? Was that a factor?
Can you be more specific?
You couldn't issue a sell. I mean, Bear Stearns just wouldn't allow you.
Oh, sure they would. People issued sells. Go. I mean, have you looked at?
But you said the neutral was the lowest that you gave. So
that I gave. That was the lowest that I gave.
So why wouldn't you issue a sell?
I didn't put too much thought into it.
The problem for the public is that they don't understand how analysts get paid. And so they think that the analyst is sort of on their side, kind of working for them, or at least that's what they used to think when things were good and stocks were going up. But in fact, you know, analysts get paid on the basis of how many deals they can bring to their firm and how tightly integrated they are with the underwriting process, which has nothing to do with helping small investors and everything to do with bringing IPOs public, which makes a huge amount for the firm and which makes a huge amount for the sort of investing professional insiders who get these deals.
A Comissão Reguladora das Bolsas Americanas aciona o alerta e faz críticas à imprensa e à participação de analistas financeiros em programas de televisão. Os mercados continuam registrando valorizações recordes até as ações das empresas da internet começarem a despencar. Falências, portas fechadas, correção de rumo. Já já você vai conhecer detalhes sobre especulação, fraude, conflito de interesses e manipulação do valor das ações das empresas.com no mercado financeiro, depois do intervalo.
Salesmanship from honest advice.
Em seus pronunciamentos, Arthur Levitt, o presidente da Comissão Reguladora das Bolsas Americanas, atacava os analistas e a TV.
A lot of analysts that we see on television recommending stocks work for firms that have business relationships with the same companies that the analysts cover. And some of these analysts' paychecks are typically tied to the performance of their employers. One can only imagine how unpopular an analyst would be who downgrades his firm's best client.
Levitt chegou a mandar um funcionário da comissão conversar com os produtores dos principais programas financeiros sobre a participação dos analistas.
The networks in general felt that they had no responsibility in terms of monitoring the guests that appeared on their programs. And my feeling was that the analysts who came on those shows and promoted certain stocks that represented companies involving investment banking clients for their employers had a responsibility to clearly reveal that on camera. I still feel that way. I still feel that the kind of disclosure we're getting from analysts in both print and electronic media is incomplete and inadequate.
Apesar das preocupações do governo, Os mercados continuaram registrando recordes.
First, more on our top story, NASDAQ 5000. America's favorite stock index closed above 5K for the first time today after...
The euphoria, where it started and who started it, exactly what is a debatable point, but once the circle started spinning, everybody fed it. You know, the public market investors did, the venture capitalists did, the bankers did, the companies that are involved in it did. Everybody got caught up into the feeding frenzy. I was a part of it. I'm sure if you were a purchaser of stock in that environment, you were caught up into it.
Who's making money? Brian Naismith, CEO of Cashflow. Shares of the network equipment maker shot up nearly $14 after Credit Suisse First Boston raised its price target and repeated a buy rating on the stock. That put its one-day gain on paper at more than $29 million.
The kind of valuations that were going on and the kind of trading that was happening in public markets, it's really fueled by what you would call the greater fool theory. In other words, there has to be a greater fool than you that buys it, or the whole thing collapses. Well, ultimately, you run out of greater fools.
After what they are already calling Black Friday, they are counting up the damage on Wall Street.
No início de 2000, a bolha explodiu.
Stocks today and sent the Dow and the Nasdaq plummeting. It was the worst single-day point loss ever for both exchanges.
Some person or some groups of people, and I think it was mainly the large institutional investors, stood up and said, no, I'm not putting another $100 million in this company because you've not made any progress to getting profitable. And once that happened, that spilled back into those companies who stopped purchasing equipment from suppliers like us or from other companies, who then our revenue started to go down, and it all happened very quickly.
At MotherNature.com, we're constantly checking out products like ginkgo biloba, a natural herb from China used to enhance memory.
As ações da Mother Nature despencaram como todas as outras. Estavam valendo menos de $2 em abril de 2000.
We started to believe, management started to believe that we were not going to easily recover, and we should operate the business differently. We should stop spending so much money. We were on TV at that time. We were burning money, about $8 million a month.
Over here, they're checking out maca, a Peruvian herb that's said to enhance male virility.
Morning, Mother Nature.
We were a wonderful cash-burning machine. So the first thing we did, we just decided to cut our marketing spending, and so we just stopped the cash burn.
The dot-com failures continue to mount,
Até o final do ano, o mercado continuou caindo.
Layoff at online mortgage banker Mortgage.com. The company announced today it's laying off 518 people, or 84% of its workforce.
As encomendas desapareceram.
As soon as one person called stop, you know, there was so much momentum built up, it just came apart.
Who's losing money? Brian Naismith. He's the CEO of Cashflow. Shares of the internet appliance provider got hammered today, losing over 10 points after Bear Stearns issued some cautious comments on the stock, citing slowing shipments. His one-day loss on paper was nearly $23 million. We're back in a moment.
Mother Nature descobriu que todas as suas suposições em relação à internet estavam erradas.
In the direct marketing business, which is what a B2C company is, the only metric that works here is what's called lifetime customer value. For the average customer you get, what do they spend the first time? What % come back and buy? What do they spend the second time? What does it cost to service each of those transactions? And to do this analysis, you need a lot of data.
A equipe passou dias fazendo contas.
We concluded that our lifetime customer value, given the data so far, was only about $10. In other words, we could not be a profitable company unless we could acquire a customer for less than $10. And at the time, it was costing us $60 to $80 to get a customer. Now, that was a very sobering conclusion. And the whole theory of e-commerce, the whole theory was that online customers would be valuable. You'd get these customers, and they would be worth a lot, so you could afford to spend a lot of money to get them. And what we realized, and I think we were one of the first to realize it, was that, gee, they're not that valuable.
Menos de ano depois da inauguração, a Mother Nature fechou suas portas em novembro de 2000. Como resultado do colapso, todos estão em dúvida. Em 99, a Mortgage.com recebeu uma oferta de compra da empresa de internet Intuit, mas o Credit Suisse aconselhou o presidente Seth Warner a recusá-la. Hoje, Warner se arrepende de ter dado ouvido aos banqueiros.
The fact is that they make more money doing an IPO, and you're becoming a company in their in their stable of companies that they've taken public than if they just do a one-time fairness opinion and then you're now a subsidiary of another public company.
Pouco antes da IPO, Warner escreveu um e-mail de 2 páginas ao seu conselho de diretores. Todos os diretores da Mortgage.com preferem fechar negócio com a Intuit. Os capitalistas de risco estão sem dúvida ansiosos para maximizar os retornos de seus investimentos com a abertura do capital.
One point in time, TCV, and I don't remember who it was, whether it was Jay or Tom, said to me, "We have done this on numerous occasions. We have made a lot of money for ourselves and our shareholders. We know what we're doing." All right? The public, as opposed to taking this price, we should do the IPO. And that's basically the message I got from all 3 of my venture capital companies. I should have been more forceful in the process of getting them to accept that those 5 million shares and move on.
In hindsight, we should have sold the company rather than go public. Is this a story of greed? Absolutely. Yeah, but that is the definition of venture capital. You better elaborate on that. Isn't it? Well, I mean, our goal is to get the biggest return possible from every company we invest in.
Isto foi o que sobrou da Mortgage.com. Centenas de caixas de papel guardadas num armazém perto de Miami. Um dos advogados que abriu o processo em favor dos credores e investidores diz que o problema da Mortgage.com não foi só ganância. Segundo ele, os capitalistas de risco e o banco CS First Boston insistiram na IPO enquanto deturpavam intencionalmente o histórico e a situação financeira da empresa.
The fact is that their conduct as fiduciaries must be judged based on what choices they made and what they did after there was no Intuit deal. And what they did was, instead of scaling this thing properly, trying to run it as a business, they concealed information, manipulated financial information, and against the advice of their internal financial people, pawned this off onto the public. What's the justification for that? The devil made me do it?
2 meses depois da oferta pública inicial da Mortgage.com, Jay Hogue, da TCV, participou do programa Wall Street Week do canal PBS. Hogue disse que a Mortgage.com estava entre as preferidas da TCV.
In the business and consumer area, we're very high on both AutoWeb and Mortgage.com. These are literally companies serving trillion-dollar markets, enormous opportunity.
Segundo Sam Burstyn, Hogue deveria ter sido mais cauteloso. E Burstyn abriu processo contra a TCV e o SC First Boston. Segundo ele, os insiders só queriam manter o valor da ação em alta até que conseguissem tirar seu dinheiro. Nem Hogue, nem o First Boston quiseram falar sobre a Mortgage.com.
One of the lessons that the public has to learn is that the fact that an investment banker is underwriting a public offering does not mean that it's a sound investment. And indeed, often means that it's not a sound investment, but that the IPO is merely an exit strategy for the insiders.
Underwriters traditionally look very carefully at building a business that would last. You would get it up to a sustainable level, and it would be built. That philosophy was gone in the tech revolution.
Nos anos 80, o advogado Tom Chu processou com sucesso Michael Milken e sua firma, a Drexel Burnham Lambert, por usar títulos especulativos para atrair capital para Wall Street. Agora, ele está entre os advogados que estão processando o Credit Suisse pela oferta pública da Mortgage.com. Chu vê semelhanças entre o mercado de IPOs dos anos 90 e o mercado de títulos especulativos dos anos 80.
What you saw in that phenomenon is early on there were probably a lot of good companies. Then there was a rush to replicate that. Drexel needed more and more product because once you set up that engine, the salesmen, the people out on the street, they're all starting to rely on that distribution, and which is all generated by fees. At some point, you get to a point where the good deals are not separated from the bad deals. I think you might find in this dot-comedy that we went through, once the mechanism for those IPOs were set up, it was like, you know, stamping them out to keep everybody eating and making a lot of money. Now, that's not to say that a lot of them weren't good deals. A lot of the junk bond deals turned out to be good deals. But as the thing progressed and more momentum is there was a lot of money chasing bad deals, and there weren't that many good deals.
Em junho de 2001, sob pressão de investigações privadas e públicas, o CS First Boston demitiu 3 banqueiros e o diretor-presidente. Todos negaram as acusações. Em dezembro, o Departamento de Justiça arquivou sua investigação, mas o banco concordou, sem admitir ter feito qualquer coisa errada, em pagar $100 milhões à SEC, a 5ª maior multa da história da comissão. Enquanto isso, a SEC continua a investigar outros bancos.
The public needs to realize really 2 things. One, that these people are not promoting the public's interest in any of these transactions. But 2, if they rely on them and the information is false or was recklessly provided, they have recourse. They sue the bastards.
Mel Weiss é advogado de Manhattan que abriu 110 processos contra várias empresas e 7 grandes bancos de investimentos.
We're dealing with a market manipulation by the investment banking community. And that's the scary thing, that the investment banking community that has a fiduciary responsibility and a statutory responsibility to protect the customer is actually in creating the artificiality in the market.
The only way you can ever take the possible excesses out of the system is to have a non-preferential way of allocating the stock. It's got to be fair, it's got to be open, and in that way, you get rid of the kind of things that sneak into a system where you have preferential allocation. That's why we came up with the auction.
No leilão, a oferta pública inicial é feita na internet e todo e qualquer investidor pode fazer seus lances.
We go out to the world and say, here's company X. How many shares do you want and what are you willing to pay? If we want to sell 1 million shares, we start at the highest price bid and count down to the 1,000,000th share. And that 1,000,000th share becomes the clearing price for the transaction. In other words, everybody who bid the clearing price or higher gets the stock they bid for at the clearing price.
Mas, no auge da bolha, a ideia de Humbrecht não foi bem recebida.
Is there an opportunity for a new way of doing IPOs? You know, intellectually, sure. It doesn't appear that the Dutch auction has gotten a huge amount of traction yet.
Dutch auctions make a great deal of sense theoretically, right? Everybody pays what they're willing to pay, and that's how you parse out the stocks. But it didn't play well in an environment where people wanted that marketing news, right? You don't get there is no headline that says, you know, XYZ Corp trades up 90% on its first day if there's a Dutch auction.
When we were looking to go public, we considered that. We thought it was conceptually a beautiful solution. But we were led to believe that the institutions would not support our stock. So if we did that, if we went the Hamburg method, we would not get any institutional support.
There wasn't anybody truly that really wanted to listen to us. I kind of felt like the designated driver at a New Year's Eve party. You know, you'd come in and say, "Hey guys, you know, this isn't going to turn out well," and their reaction was, "What could be better than this? I sell my stock at 10 and it goes to 100 and everybody's rich and who's lost, and isn't this a wonderful thing?"
Good. All right. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are.
Por enquanto, a maioria das empresas reluta em romper com Wall Street.
Incorporated into the Instinet offering, as you all know, 17.5% of the shares were allocated.
Como uma espécie de experiência em subscrição, a Instinet, uma firma de corretagem eletrônica, decidiu dividir a sua oferta pública entre Humbrecht e um subscritor tradicional, o CS First Boston.
Innovation into the marketplace, which is something that this company stands for, and I know Bill Hambrecht has really led the charge in that vision, and we'd like to thank Bill as a partner.
A ação da Instinet abriu a $14 e fechou a 17,65.
And again, both very well together. This is the first time that retail investors who bid $14.50 are guaranteed an allocation in shares. Right? And I think
No ambiente pós-bolha, esta IPO foi considerada um sucesso e a prova de que o leilão pode funcionar. Assim, um banco de investimentos por trás da emissão, o processo deixa os banqueiros tradicionais temerosos.
What this is, it's sort of an opening. The ultimate leverage is being able to include somebody or exclude them from an offering that he thinks is attractive. That's the leverage that people fight to keep. That's at the very base of a lot of these firms is that leverage of allocation.
Trade a 400 over here.
You've done 400 already?
Yeah.
Great. The whole implication of the internet is bringing transparency and level playing field to marketplaces. This is what it's all about. And I think the big firms understand that. I mean, they and ultimately know that no matter how they want to fight to keep a cozy kind of relationship and to keep transparency out of the marketplace, it just isn't going to happen. Somebody is going to bring transparency to this marketplace.
Mas talvez Humbert esteja otimista demais em relação à disposição de Wall Street para mudar. A explosão das ofertas públicas dos últimos anos gerou um frenesi que rendeu bilhões aos bancos de Wall Street. Poucas pessoas que trabalham aqui acham que o sistema precisa ser modificado.
You know, democratization has been going on in this country financially since the 70s. And people do have a lot more information than they used to, and they can make better decisions, and they can trade stocks more easily, and all of that is true. But if the events of Internet Mania prove anything, they prove that Wall Street is still a club, and that insiders still have an enormous advantage over the rest of us. And all the technology and all the democratization has simply not been able to trump that one fact.